What's up, New Vegas fans? I'm back in the Mojave, and in this episode of Early Game POWA, I go over possible weapons you can take right out of Doc Mitchell's house, right after he scoops the lead out of your brain and
whoa, easy there, easy.
Sends you on your merry way. The wasteland is your oyster. Unique weapons are my favorite part of New Vegas by far, as you can really build your entire character around these weapons in mind, and they just add spice and variety on repeat playthroughs and for different character builds. In these videos, I'm going to be going over where to find these unique weapons, how to get them, how difficult it is to obtain them based on a scale of 1 to 5, all based off the assumption of you being in the early game and somewhere in the level 1 to 6 range. And in my humble opinion, if it's even worth beelining straight to these weapons for that sweet dose of early game power. With all that said, let's just jump straight into it for the first episode of this series, featuring the unique variant of the Machete, the Liberator.
But I ain't a fink. Dig.
I personally have always liked the machetes in this game, despite them being somewhat lackluster stats-wise compared to a lot of other melee weapons. They just really do feel good to use in the early to early mid-game, and they fit the aesthetic of the wasteland very well, just being a crude, barbaric, off-with-your-head, simplistic weapon that itches that reptilian side of your brain. The Liberator requires a mere 25 melee weapons and just 3 strength in utilizing efficiently, which is honestly no problem at all for any build. Even like a guns build, you're gonna have more than 3 strength, and pretty much any character, especially if you're running a melee build, this is no problem. The base damage of the Liberator comes in at a respectable 18, with a surprisingly high DPS of 62.3, so it's pretty competent, especially in DPS, as this does have a pretty fast attack speed at 3.5 times. It boasts an identical crit damage to the base damage, which is common for a lot of weapons in this game. At 18, it has a fantastic 3 times crit multiplier, and an 18 AP or action point cost in VATS, which is pretty good for VATS, as melee weapons usually are pretty efficient in VATS, just generally speaking. Like all machetes, it has an effect bonus of limb damage, with this bonus being 2.5 compared to the standard machete's 2, so a smidge higher. This effect lets you handicap or cripple enemies faster when striking appendages, which can come in handy, especially on certain enemies like rad scorpions or glowing ones from time to time, although this is more of just an added bonus, and I'm honestly not quite sure if hitting limbs actually multiplies damage. I think it does, but I could be wrong about that. The Liberator comes with the VATS attack Backslash. This deals 70% of the weapon's base damage at the cost of 3 lower action points, making this VATS attack 15 AP, so it's slightly less damage for squeezing an attack or 2 in VATS. This attack, however, requires 50 melee weapons to actually perform, which is the same for a lot of other melee weapons if I recall correctly, and it's really nothing special to write home about, but it serves its purpose and it's not bad by any means. The Liberator's downfall or cons is pretty much the cons to all machetes. It has really bad item health at just 75, which to be fair is higher than the standard machete by 25, so you get more life out of this blade before it goes bust or dull by comparison. Regardless of this boost in item health, it does break down pretty fast, not too fast, but it also does break a lot faster if you take the powerful and commonly taken trait Build to Destroy. Machetes being very common around the wasteland, and they're often just found on fallen Caesar's Legion forces sprinkled all around. You can even find Legion forces right outside of Novak right after you cross the bridge, for example, really highlights that repairing this weapon isn't really that big of a deal. And like all other melee weapons, if you go the route of obtaining the perk Jury Rigging, they're all really easy to repair, so that's a plus. The Liberator is found in the war-ravaged town of Nelson, currently in the clutches of Caesar's forces, and it's wielded by the unique NPC named Dead Sea. I personally have rushed Dead Sea and obtained this weapon very early, like at level 3 on very hardcore mode difficulty, with very little armor, and rarely struggled in killing Dead Sea and his 2 goons. And I don't think I've ever died to them, with only a couple of quote-unquote close calls, overall making the difficulty scale of obtaining this weapon very low at 2. 2 out of 5, with it being 2 just because of the travel and the minor effort in killing Dead Sea and his 2 goons. But even the travel isn't that much of a big deal because Fallout New Vegas in general is known for the infamous loop, where most players are organically funneled in going this direction anyways, either through quests or through world design from the enemies. And although Nelson is kind of off the beaten path, the loop brings you to Novak just a mere stone's throw away from Nelson. And the travel from Novak to Nelson poses no real threats to the courier at all, assuming you just stay on the road or you didn't kill Volpes and Colta back in Nipton.
Don't worry. I won't have you lashed to a cross like the rest of these degenerates.
Catching some bad reputation with the Legion in the process. Or you don't make a dumb mistake like being dressed up as an NCR soldier by accident, as the Legion here will inherently be neutral, assuming you haven't rustled any feathers beforehand. The ironic thing here too is right upon entering Nelson, you'll most likely be taken straight to Dead Sea himself by wandering Caesar Legion forces patrolling around the ransacked town, providing an ample opportunity to strike and take yours. Outside of killing Dead Sea and his 2 comrades, which again pose very little risk, as his comrades are usually just equipped with single-shot shotguns in the early levels, the only thing you really have to worry about is Dead Sea himself, as he does pose some risk for lower leveled and lower armored players, if you let him get some shots off with his 10mm SMG, which has decent DPS. The reputation hit you incur from deading Dead Sea and his 2 goons don't set the rest of the forces ironically on the outside hostile towards you, so you pretty much just have to deal with them and this weapon is yours for the taking. Another funny thing you can do, which I've had happen a couple times, is you can sneak crit Dead Sea from a hidden position and sometimes, for whatever reason, not even aggro the 2 other legionaries in the room. I guess it just works.
All of this just works.
A guaranteed way of doing this is popping a stealth boy, but honestly it's kind of a waste of a stealth boy of a somewhat precious resource, and I generally advise against this, but it makes obtaining this weapon even easier, only really needing a somewhat decent rifle or pistol in doing so. Examples of weapons you can use for this is something like the cowboy repeater, that gun, or even a hunting rifle. You can also go down a much more convoluted route by doing the side quests We Are Legion for Caesar or Back in Your Own Backyard for the NCR respectively. I have done these quests, but not in a very long time, where you basically pick sides at Nelson in typical RPG fashion. We Are Legion, of course, has you siding with the Legion, and Back in Your Own Backyard has you side with the NCR. Both of these quests entail different outcomes, of course. Siding with the Legion at the end has Dead Sea bestow this gift upon you, keeping him alive in the process if you want to go down this route. And I honestly don't remember what the outcome of the NCR quest is. I do remember it's something about freeing the captive NCR members that are crucified, but I don't recall if this gets Dead Sea hostile or if he comes up or he runs up on you, but I'd imagine you can just go kill him regardless and just pry this from his cold hands in the process. So if you're up for picking sides and want some EXP, or if you're just a completionist, you can also just simply 5-finger discount this from Dead Sea, either by having a decent sneak skill level, popping a stealth boy, all while utilizing the infamous safe scumming that Fallout games are known for, until you succeed in pickpocketing this. There's also no reverse pickpocketing required for this, which is nice, as Dead Sea comes default equipped with his 10mm SMG, leaving this in his inventory upon pickpocketing, just waiting for your sticky fingers. And this all really just leads to, is the Liberator even worth obtaining for that early game POWA? I'd say yes and no. It's kind of weird to be so wishy-washy on my very first video in this series, but let me explain. If you want an easy to grab decent melee weapon right outside of Novak to slice and dice, then I'd say yeah, go for it. It's really not that big of a deal to get this weapon at all and takes very little time or effort in doing so. The biggest no for me, however, depends on whether you have the Courier Stash DLC, which I feel like most people do nowadays because you get the Ultimate Edition of New Vegas usually when you buy it, as the Courier Stash gets you strapped right out of Doc Mitchell's house with the broad machete. And although the Liberator is definitely better than the broad machete by every metric, it's not a gargantuan upgrade or anything. And machetes are just kind of weapons that fall off later. They're just weapons you use to slash some geckos, some ghouls, maybe some coyotes or powder gangers or a rad scorpion or two, and then you just kind of move on to greener pastures. You don't really hold them near and dear to your heart. They're not worth dumping weapon repair kits on, in my opinion. They're just something that you kind of slash some stuff with, repair them when you can, and then move on. And since I personally don't use the courier stashes items at all anymore, as I really don't like the early game power creep that they provide, especially the armors and the grenade rifle being crazy OP for the early game. But if you do use the courier stashes item and you have no qualms about using them, then the broad machete, I'd say, honestly just use that. But I will say the Liberator is a pretty underrated weapon, and it really does serve its function as an early game all-purpose weapon very well. It has a very low weight of 2, so it's not a burden to bear, and it's something that's nice for cannon fodder enemies when you don't want to lose durability on your more valuable, powerful melee weapons. And it really does feel very good to use, as I really do like its sprinting power attack to close some distance, and just the general speed and feeling when engaging enemies with it. It's just not a weapon overall I'd say is worth going out of your way and obtaining, and it's not a make or break early game power weapon. Despite it being a personal favorite of mine, as I usually always go and kill Dead Sea when I get to Novak and grab it, it's kind of somewhat of a ritual of mine, and I kind of just like having a Caesar's Legion off with your head weapon that I grabbed off a named NPC to wreak havoc with upon the wasteland. There's just something about it, I don't know. If you like this video, consider leaving me a like and a sub, you know, all that good YouTube stuff, I'd really appreciate it. But what's your opinion of the Liberator? Is it a weapon you even knew of? Is it something you've ever grabbed, and did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know down in the comments. And with all that said, I hope to see you in the next one.